Hello and welcome to another episode of But Have You Heard About? My name is Courtney, and today I am joined by my friend Trisha.
Hello.
And we are going to educate you on, well, there's dogs in the background, so I would say I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. But we want to educate you on something I recently learned about, which was the Dakota 38. Have you ever heard about this, Trisha?
No, this is my first time.
Well, to give you the brief summary, on December 26 of 1862, 38 warriors of the Dakota tribe were mass executed by hangings on orders of Abraham Lincoln.
Okay.
This is during the Civil, if you know your Civil War history, this is during the Civil War, so you already kind of have, a lot going on.
I mean, did someone hand it to him? He thought it was an autograph and
No.
here, sign this?
He actually lessened the amount of people that were going to be executed by quite a bit.
I mean, that's something, but...
Yeah. So let's get into the nitty-gritty and what exactly led to this. So the way I look at it by doing research, also there's a documentary about a memorial ride that has been done. It's called the Dakota 38 plus 2. It came out in 2012. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube, and it's pretty great. There are some... So one of my favorite lines from the documentary was from one of those that were part of the ride saying, "Of course I'm racist against Caucasians." And after hearing this story, it makes a lot of sense for, I would say, don't trust those white people, number one. Number two, don't trust the government. So once we get into the story.
So, tell me the name of this again on YouTube.
Dakota 38 plus 2.
But it's they put a movie on, they made a movie?
Yeah.
They made a documentary?
They made a documentary that goes into the history of what actually happened and why they did this memorial ride. And it goes through the memorial ride. And there are some parts where you're just kind of like, oh, okay. So they stopped along the way on this, basically it was like a trail ride. Oh. But it's in December in fucking South Dakota to Minnesota.
All right.
They go through multiple blizzards. Okay. And they stop at, different farmers along the way. And they have to stop at white people's ranches along the way or counties. And they wind up seeing a lot of white people. And it's the interaction and the perception from the people that are on the ride, so their descendants. It's interesting how they interact with the hosts, some of them, because they're like, I said hi to 2 of you. I can say hi to all 50 of you.
And so did these people were aware of what they were doing, or they'd never heard of this before?
A lot of them had never heard of it. They were like, I want to be a part of this. I want to, know the story. So again, what led to all of this? Basically, it was a lot of unkept promises that were being slightly fulfilled pre-Civil War by the U.S. government, obviously. The Eastern Dakota ceded large parts of land, mainly in Minnesota, for money and provisions through a series of treaties in 1837, 1851, and 1858. Through these treaties, all 4 bands of Eastern Dakota tribes were basically kicked out of their fertile land that they had lived on in Minnesota and reluctantly moved to a reservation that was about 20 miles wide and then 10 miles wide across the Minnesota River, which was running down the middle of it. So it was not a very big plot of land.
Okay.
So this is thousands of people living on this.
And the government basically said, you don't have a choice.
They
by
use,
treaties,
yeah.
I'm guessing.
It's, by treaties, they're also here saying, we will give you money on a yearly basis. Yeah. We will give you some sort of provisions to help you. And this all, the last treaty was 1858. So that's years before the Civil War, which was started in 1861. So the U.S. Indian agents told the indigenous population to become farmers over their long-held way of life. So honestly, I didn't know what an Indian agent was. So I did some research because I was like, what the fuck's an Indian agent? They were first created in 1783 to be a liaison, mostly for land sales that were made a federal endeavor by the U.S. government, because they're like, only the U.S. government can buy land and have treaties with any sort of Indian population, Native Americans, anyone. The U.S. government, anyone that was already living on the land. They're like, we have the ability to make treaties with you and also to buy land. Okay. White people couldn't do it. The settlers couldn't do it, technically. White people did it, but not the settlers. So just the government. Big old government coming in.
So they're interpreters.
Yes. These Indian agents were appointed by presidents, and their main job was to live among them to help them assimilate. Which, talking about Indian reservation schools and the fact that that was definitely something that was kept up through, the mid 20th century, so up to like 1960s, 70s, with making people assimilate to the Western culture way of life, even though
Still dances with wolves.
it is very much so dances with wolves. I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So, Indian agents also helped with the treaties that were made under the Department of War. Let's go back to the story at hand. By 1861, 3 years after the last treaty, the Dakotas had horrible crop failure and an even harsher winter due to the depletion of their natural hunting game by the newly settled settlers.
Sure. And then the bribes were looking good at that point.
Yeah. So, in the summer of 1862, tensions were rising between the Eastern Dakota, the Indian agents, and the now local traders. Indian agents were late with their payments to the Dakotas because of the Civil War.
Okay.
So it's a year into the Civil War.
We're funding a war, Yeah.
And the U.S. government's just fucking slow.
And they're like,
oh shit, we got to do this because keeping the nation together is number one priority for Lincoln.
Yeah. Accounts payable was out of the office.
Yeah. Accounts payable was fighting the fucking war.
Sure.
So the traders refused to give any sort of credit to the Dakota Indians because they didn't know or believe the payment would actually ever come because of the Civil War.
Well,
it was smart, but also that led to like huge problems.
I mean, I would think there would be something written into these treaties that say if we fail to hold up one end, then the whole thing's off.
Exactly. Well,
it's like a card payment. I'm not going to...
But this is also the U.S. government wrote these treaties. And we all know that they were not, like these Indian agents that were supposed to be that liaison, were not necessarily saying everything.
And they weren't in it for probably the right reasons.
Right. Just like with how, up until Katrina, the people that were appointed to Homeland, to FEMA by the president usually had nothing to do with natural disasters and didn't know what the hell they were doing. Yeah. It was very evident during the Bush administration, and probably if they had a huge hurricane like that before, would have become very apparent. So this was just fuck around, find out 1800s style. Mm-hmm. Because of this, inability for the traders to be like, we'll give you credit so you can have food because you were unable to grow on land that you don't fucking know. Mm-hmm. And the settlers are literally killing your game, such as the bison, the buffalo, just depleting that.
Yeah, pretty clever. Let's ruin it where you can't take care of yourself and then be like, oh, we'll take care of you and you don't have a choice.
So this led to fear of starvation by August of 1862. Because I had to think about it. I was like, August, y'all already scared about the winter? Then I was like, oh shit, you in Minnesota.
Yeah.
You guys get winter by 17. Yeah, you guys actually get winter in September. Yeah, really. On August 17th, 1862, 4 young warriors killed 5 settlers in Acton, Minnesota.
Sure, and I'm sure they were totally unheard of, right?
Right. And honestly, it probably went as a barter system gone wrong, where you have these native tribesmen that are like, look, I see you have 30 chickens. Can we have some? We don't have anything. Can you, we want some eggs or something?
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know. This part of history definitely sure as hell wasn't written down. But anyways, so after this attack, where the 5 settlers were killed, the Dakota leaders feared that this attack by their, fellow tribesmen would receive a reprisal from the U.S. forces. I guess they didn't realize that they were at fucking war, the Civil War. They should have just left it. My opinion. Should have just fucking left it and been like, we didn't do shit.
I really wonder how the news spread at that point, though, in rural areas about, when the war first began.
This is a year in. False. Yeah. But this is also a year in. And you have a lot of people that aren't probably speaking English. I mean, not to say they didn't have bilingual, but I'm pretty sure it's not as much as would be now.
Yeah. Or if they knew it was going to be full-fledged war at that point, that was going to go on for a while.
Did they know?
They're still hopeful. It's like a skirmish.
Yeah. So then multiple chiefs convened a war council, which involved a man called Little Crow. I am not going to butcher his name, the name from his tribe. I ain't playing that game. So anyways, Little Crow. They convened near Little Crow's village, which was near the Lower Sioux Agency. And Little Crow himself was berated into going into war by the others. Okay. And the thing is that they didn't really want to go to war with the settlers because they were like, we're waiting on the U.S. government. Yeah. And we don't know when it's going to come. The Indian agents aren't telling us anything. Mm-hmm. So the people that are supposed to be our liaison is like, I don't know shit. So the meeting came to have this goal. The goal was drive those settlers from the Minnesota River Valley. Geography is not my forte. However, the Minnesota River Valley is where they originally were from, and that was part of one of their treaties that they let the land go. Because, as is very evident looking at any sort of treaties that was made by the Indian Affairs Bureau back in the good old days, basically said that they were trying to take all of the land that they could and just give them less and less land to drive them out or to make them assimilate to become more like white people and like the other settlers that were there.
And I'm sure that there, just like any vote, there are many Indians that did not want this to happen. So now that they're getting screwed over, they're probably going to say, all right, let's take this to the streets.
Let's go. In which they did literally the following morning on August 18th, a large party of painted and armed Sioux warriors surprise attacked the settlement population of Lower Sioux Agency. Unsuspecting men, women, and children were killed. About 20 were killed total. Okay. And these are just, I would say, assumptions. I don't know how many of the Sioux perished or if they were included in that 20 total. So in the following week, the Sioux attacked a 40-man relief party of soldiers at Fort Ridgely. They also took out some they attacked isolated farms as well as other communities in over 30 counties.
Yeah, I'm seeing kind of both sides here.
I yes and no. Because they waited, I would say. They knew they had a harsh winter before. Sure. And they came in and they were like, we need our stuff from the U.S. government. And it was months late. Mm-hmm. The government's not holding up their side of the treaty. Sure. In their opinion, it's null and void. You're on our land. Get the fuck out.
Yeah, and I get it. And then, like, what else? They have no other way to make a statement.
They don't. And if nobody wants to give them that credit for them to have, supplies to feed themselves. Yeah. It gets fun. So, obviously, as I mentioned, the Civil War is going on. And that slowed the U.S. government's overall response. However, the state itself of Minnesota responded on September 23rd. So about a whole month later. They finally responded to what was going on.
It's really not bad for government time.
No. I was like, oh shit, Minnesota apparently has their shit together. They responded with an army of volunteer infantry, artillery, and citizen militia. And it was organized.
They were all fired up and ready to sign up. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're attacking. Yeah. So one of the things that came out in this documentary was you had a white person who literally was like, both sides. And I was like, oh, yeah, but...
I could see how it's sold.
It's sold. And
these poor innocent settlers are just minding their farm, and then they got attacked.
But they also knew... I was like, how did you not know what land you were taking either? And also...
And that's some rough, wild nature out there.
So. And you gotta, that's Oregon Trail. You should expect some shit. This, militia and stuff was organized by Governor Alexander Ramsey. This party defeated Little Crow at the Battle of Wood Lake on September 23rd. So in total, 358 settlers were killed, 77 soldiers, and 29 volunteers. The Sioux weren't just showing up at a farm and then murdering everybody in sight.
Yeah.
They also took a shit ton of captives and prisoners. You died because you wanted to fight back when they were trying to basically gather supply and get you off. Yeah. So if you were going to... So if you didn't attack, if you did the whole... Yeah. But if you just rolled over and said, okay, cool, what you need?
We're going to go.
What do I got to do? Take what you got. You were fine. So on September 23rd, 2,000 Dakotas surrendered or they were taken into custody. 1,658 were non-combatants and some that had actually released hostages and captives. So out of 2,000, less than 400 were actually a part of any sort of attacks or wanted anything to do with what was happening.
Yeah, that sucks.
It's a very small number. So it gets worse, okay? Let's just keep going. So Little Crow, who was part of the raiding parties, as one may say, him and a group of about 150 to 250 followers fled to the North Plains of then North Dakota territory, the Dakota territory, and then also into Canada. Because at the time, there were no border agents. No one cared. It was fucking Canada. Go live with the Queensland.
I don't know how you even tell where the border was.
No one.
Rope?
There was a
signs.
Yeah, there was a whole little fight between some Canadians and American settlers over in
There's a piece I'd like to explore.
Oh yeah, we can talk. We will. We'll talk about
the bounties.
Well, it's this happened over in the Washington area because they never. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because treaties weren't super specific. I love it. So, out of those, basically 2,000 people, 498 total trials happened. And this happened in a span of less than 6 weeks. And it gets worse, in my opinion. A military commission that was composed of officers from the Minnesota Volunteer Infantry
So a bunch of nobodies.
No, people that were literally like, get the fuck off our land, that, you know, they are part of the settlers. Yeah, so
they're like, you killed my cousin John.
Yeah.
I didn't forget.
Or, I
don't
mean,
want to be on your jury.
Exactly.
Great.
And there weren't even juries. It was just a commission.
Yeah, awesome.
And, you know, they sentenced 303 Dakota men to death.
Sure.
And they were sentenced to death for crimes ranging from rape to murder. So, if you were a Dakota and you were being tried against, you didn't have any sort of legal representation.
Sure. Or if you did, it was in jail.
Nope, you had none. They had none. They were not allowed any. So they had no one to represent them.
And they didn't know who was who.
And they also, that's what I was like, how did you actually know who did what?
You don't.
Because also, we have a lot of racist people back then that would assume.
Your driver's license.
Well, and they also just assume you're all the same. Like, that's probably something that has been said since, I don't know, the 1600s in this country. Donna Man, you all look the same to me.
Yep.
It's the lovely racist playbook. So some of these cases and decisions took less than 5 minutes to decide if you were going to get murdered.
They even got that, honestly.
And the fact that out of 498, 303 were found guilty to be murdered, like to be executed. So whatever it was, we're going to kill you just because of what you did.
But you got to wait first. We're going to have you wait around in the winter in probably a field.
Yeah, so this was like September, so 6 weeks from the end of September, so October, mid of November. Okay? Because this was a federal matter, Lincoln did have to review the cases. And he went through each one, and he got lobbied by both sides.
And
this is the only...
I mean, at least the man is a lawyer. He knows what he's...
But also, you're reading from people that are...
making shit up.
Well, also, they're invested individually.
Yeah.
It would be like having a jury that is full of your BFFs being like, this is... No, they ain't guilty. I may have seen that knife in their hand. I might have seen them stabbing someone. But you know what? No, they didn't actually kill. It was a play knife. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. They're like, this knife, it looked like that, but it was play. It was a play knife. It was jokes. Basically, that's what happened.
Sure.
And none.
War, he's not going to travel out there.
But also anything that any of the white settlers may have done, none of that was taken into account either. And basically, the Minnesota governor, man, where's this accent coming from? The governor of Minnesota. Basically said, if you scalp Indians, it doesn't matter who it is, what they're doing, you get paid.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
You literally made money for that.
You made money for scalping it. So, if you were a Dakota tribesman and you were just fucking going out here taking your fucking cow, doing whatever the fuck you want to do with a cow, because you're like, what the fuck is a cow? Where'd this shit come from? And now you have to learn how to, domesticate this shit, and what the fuck kind of food are you going to get from it? You're just out here maybe milking, learning how to fucking milk a cow, and you get fucking whacked in the head by Johnny fucking Appleseed over there. Yeah. Because he wants your scalp. But you have done nothing. Like, that is the repercussions that are happening during that, like, time frame. Out of the 303 original death sentences, 39 were actually given death. I'm sorry, 38. 38 were given death sentences.
That's okay.
And
so your original comment, was more shocking than, nothing is good.
Nothing is good.
That sounds better.
So those 38 men, the only reason...
You signed that paper.
But again, you're not hearing... I wouldn't say, like, both sides, but I'm like, in this situation, there should have been a little bit more of, the U.S. government should have owned up to fuck-ups.
I'm surprised there was any kind of... The fact that they faked their way through trials is shocking to me.
It's not. They're not even trials. It's a commission. So it's just a military commission where it's...
The fact that they wrote any of this, like, I'm surprised that they even went through the motions.
Only those that were involved in civilian deaths, so killing settlers, those were the ones that actually were going to be put to death. And it was to be carried out on December 26th of 1862. Merry fucking Christmas. So the day after jolly old Saint Nick came to see you during the Civil War, the next day you get to go watch a hanging.
Fucking cold and miserable too.
So, 38 men they all got executed at the same exact time. And this was and still is the largest one-day mass execution in American history.
Was it bullets?
Nope. You got hanged.
They made 38 in a row.
It was in a square.
Oh my god.
So you get to, but they had one of the things that they talked about in the documentary, and I'll link the link in the podcast if you want to check it out, because I totally would, since it is free and it's on YouTube and it was made to be free to educate, to help the healing process, which I really like that the memorial rite itself was created to help the healing process, and the fact that you have members of the Sioux Dakota tribes that are like, we want to start the healing process with everyone so we can Anyways, talk more about that when we get to the end. But literally when these men were being taken to be hung or to be hanged,
I think you're okay either way.
Is it? So then when they were taken to basically be killed, they were thanking, like saying like to their captors, they're like, hey, like grabbing their hand, like, thanks. You like basically like, I'll see you like a long goodbye. They didn't say that. But they also didn't have, it's, you know, indigenous people, their religion doesn't necessarily have hell.
They're bigger than I.
They're bigger than basically anybody in the Civil fucking War, I can tell you that much. Out of those men that did receive a commuted sentence, so from the 38 to the 303, whatever that number is, math is hard for me. I ain't going to do that today. Those that received those shortened sentences were sent to Camp McKellen, I think it's McKellen, in Iowa for 4 years. Like, just going to go hang out at and basically they were put in like almost an internment camp for 4,
like
I'm sorry. Yeah, 4 years.
And they put them in cells?
I don't know.
Wow.
Like, I didn't look too much into this, and I probably should have just for this part. So, what came from this, like, overall? Basically, almost immediately, the U.S. government is like, fuck this shit. They abolish the Eastern Dakota and the Ho-Chunk reservations in Minnesota and declare their treaties null and void. Those that were living on the reservation, that 20 by 10 type mile, were then put in an encampment near Fort Snelling. They were then exiled from Minnesota and placed on riverboats and sent to a reservation in what is now present-day South Dakota. Many of those forced to... I say many, but some of those that were forced to relocate on those boats literally jumped off the steamboat.
Oh, yeah. I would be like, I'm just fine. I can take care of myself in the middle of nowhere.
Well, it's not even that. They literally jumped off to their death, knowing that they would die. It's sombering. They didn't want to go on. They didn't want to do it. And during the time that they were held near Fort Snells, it was literally through the winter. Through the whole winter.
Yeah, I'm sure they were really well cared for.
Through probably March or whatever, disease spread quickly and it killed hundreds of them. And there was about 1,600 or so that were left from the reservation.
Yeah, you forget about the infection piece.
And they have no resistance
and no hygiene in that place. Such close quarters.
But you have, 1,600 people for a fucking tribe. Like, to me, they used to probably be closer to 10,000 or even over. And that's what kills me. So Congress also passed legislation almost immediately, making it illegal for anyone of the Dakota tribes to live in Minnesota. And this is technically still a fucking law.
No shit. What do they call it?
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll link that shit, but I don't know what it's called.
How are you going to prove that? You're like, I'm not that tribe. I'm a different tribe.
Right.
Like, what the hell is
I feel that's the point, is that you can't prove, so they just don't want you to live there, even if you were part of a different, or they didn't use the word mudblood, but it looked like dirty blood.
Damn.
for being of mixed race. And they're like, if you are that, you also cannot live in Minnesota. So it was them trying to like weirdly prove. But anyways, in the years following, a number of memorials were established honoring those white settlers.
I'll bet. I'd love to see the local education to children in the public schools, because
they don't know. But they also didn't have it, because you have to think about what happened to get to that. You can't just say, well, we had a war.
I bet that there's
but they are called the Sioux
or
Wars.
Bridges or parks that have some big rock with a plaque on it that's full of crap.
So in Mankato, Minnesota, which is where they were hung, there was a memorial to the mass execution itself that was there and existed until the early 1970s.
I know people were like, get this shit out of my face.
It took to the 70s, so it took like 100 years. And you don't, like, Minnesota is such a weird place, because you think of it very like, I think of it like it's chill. And then you start thinking about it and you're like, no, man, they not chill there. They pretty fucking racist still.
And the piece that is interesting to me is like the Civil War just dominated the news, and it's everywhere, but so far north. People don't understand. I guess there's this misconception that everything's peaceful and great if you're super far north and safe from the Civil War fights. And then all this shit's going on at the same time that it's not getting any press.
And also, this was so at the beginning of the Civil War, they were not doing conscription yet. So they actually had the men to fight back from the north. And I was just like, this is intriguing.
Well, the fact that it made it all the way to the office of the president, something.
Only because it was a federal matter.
I guess. Yeah, sure. Money was involved.
But it took until, I want to say it was 2012, for the governor of Minnesota to basically issue an apology.
Was that, who was the WWE wrestler?
I don't think it was him.
Oh, I think it was. I gotta Google this.
So it was not Governor Ventura that was there to do this. It was Governor Mark Dayton that started this process, and then it continued on with the current governor they have, Tim Walz. So in 2021, the government of Minnesota has actually given back land that has been held by the Minnesota Historical Society, I believe.
Excellent.
And has given back that land to what's left of those eastern bands of the Dakota tribes. Because all that land from Minnesota to the Dakotas was technically theirs, but they just kept getting pushed into smaller and smaller parts of their land. And also into places that weren't even technically their land to begin with.
I'm just glad that people are still there to even this far ahead, that they are there to get that back.
Yeah.
And they just didn't leave entirely.
And I mean, I've talked about the fact on this podcast that I've wanted to talk about residential schools because they're pretty fucking horrible. And like the legacy of residential schools and the fact that in this world, we still have multiple countries that have residential schools. And it's to make people either assimilate or basically to use forced labor for children. Like they use that in India. Anyways, we're talking shit about the U.S. government today, though, not other countries.
I do that in most days.
Same. Well, is there anything that you would like to reflect on that you've learned today about the Dakota 38?
No, I mean, I feel better about it. We do hear that Lincoln was involved in this. It's pretty shocking, but that he lessened the blow to about 10% of the original.
Yes, I mean, but they should have, in my opinion, from my perspective, if you look at legal documents, there should be a clause for each to get out of a treaty.
I agree.
And so, in all fairness, I feel like none of them should have been hung for that. Because all they were doing was being like, you didn't give us what we were promised, so we went back to take our land back because you didn't bring the provisions and you didn't provide the money that was already past due.
Yeah, like I'm not going to stay on this reservation where you promised you'd feed me and now I'm starving to death and get the hell out of here and go home.
Exactly.
Now somebody's living in my house.
Yep. Like, look, somebody's living on sacred land and it's just some brand new German settler who don't give a fuck.
That language very must have been wild. All they speak is weapons.
Exactly. And I think that's why it was worse than what it needed to. It could have been a lot less if we all, I don't know, had a universal language of love.
I think when you show up there with some weapons on some horses and like they don't care why.
Well, and when you go out west from, even if you were barely in the city or just got off the freaking boat at Ellis, like right around Ellis Island or whatever, or you just got cleared from Ellis Island, you probably hear stories of the fucking West. And, they talked about, the savage Indian was many titles, and you're probably warned if you see any of them with painted faces on a horse, you're warned. They're gonna kill you. There's a good possibility that they may have seen them not even in face paintings, just being on a horse, and they don't understand. And
first, ask later.
Yeah, so I think that is also what happened in this situation, going back and forth. But anyways, that was today's somber history lesson. But have you heard about?
Nice talking to you.
It was lovely. We learned a lot. I'm sure I did not do this justice. I wish I had more or even better representation for finding good or more helpful research and not just necessarily facts, because I feel like sometimes even facts can sound biased in how they're presented. Because I feel like there's probably more to the story.
Oh, definitely. I think if you could dig around in the little church basements in Minnesota and the microfiche, it's just a treasure trove.
Shit.
Of witness statements.
They probably threw some shit in some ice fishing holes. Well, hopefully you have a better day after you've learned some knowledge, and wish you the best as always. Bye!